He spent 10 years inside, and the first thing he does is run a man over with his car. Twice, actually. That's your introduction to Richie.
I shouldn't have to explain myself. I'm from the old school. You want to raise your hands, you give her your last name. Until then, keep your hands in your pockets.
Now, most shows would frame that as a power move. Here's the scary guy, and here's what he's capable of. But The Sopranos isn't most shows, and if you watch that scene again, it doesn't read like power at all, because it reads like panic.
What's this?
It's the jacket.
The jacket.
It's a beautiful jacket, but it's yours to have now. It's a jacket. You're not wearing the jacket.
It's in the car.
It was never about the jacket itself. Richie tells Tony this huge story about the jacket, how he took it off the toughest guy in Essex County. And to Richie, this thing isn't clothing, because it's proof of who he was. Proof that his name used to mean something the second he walked into a room. And after 10 years in prison, that matters to him more than almost anything. Because Richie gets out expecting the world to still work the way he remembers. Same fear and respect, but it doesn't. Tony barely cares about the jacket, and eventually he gives it away without a second thought, and that destroys Richie more than he lets on.
Richie, you know I love you. What was yours before you went away will be yours again.
What's mine is not yours to give me.
Because suddenly the object Richie treated like a sacred symbol of his reputation turns out to mean absolutely nothing to anybody else. That's why the Beansy situation matters too.
What did I do? Tell me, what did I do? This is not right, Richie.
Beansy isn't refusing Richie because he wants a war. He's just moved on with his life. He's successful, comfortable, and every time he talks to Richie, there's this underlying message Richie can't stand hearing. You don't scare me like you used to. So Richie in this situation escalates. Not because he's calculating, but because he's desperate to force the world to confirm the story he still tells himself about who he is. And that's the thing the show establishes about Richie immediately. He almost never asks for anything, because underneath all of it is one question: do you still fear me?
Put a shirt on. I'm getting a chubby. You tell me this is the way it is, and so be it. You tell me otherwise, I'm yours, Junior. Whatever, whoever.
So in reality, prison didn't harden Richie, it basically fossilized him. He walked in as one kind of man and he walked out as that exact same man 10 years later, dropped into a world that quietly evolved past everything he understood. New dynamics, a boss who runs things differently, doesn't operate by the rules. Richie memorized, and Richie cannot compute it.
What's mine is not yours to give me. I said what I wanted to say. Oh, we got a problem, kid?
Things are different now. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, go fuck yourself.
Everything he respects is from before, the old ways, the way the chain of command used to work, the rituals that told you where you stood and what you were owed. He idolizes Junior not because Junior is actually powerful anymore, but because Junior represents the version of this world that Richie still believes in. In this instance, Junior is a relic, and Richie doesn't see that, or I guess he doesn't want to. His problem with Tony isn't really about who's boss, it goes deeper than that. Tony represents a version of this life that Richie genuinely doesn't recognize. Tony talks to a therapist, and he has his doubts. So basically, Tony is complicated in ways that Richie finds almost offensive, because if you're allowed to be complicated, then what was the point of everything Richie sacrificed to be hard? There's a term for what Richie is doing, and it applies to a lot more people than just mob guys, performing toughness not as identity but as armor. Not because it's who you are, but because the alternative, basically admitting that you don't know where you fit anymore, feels unsurvivable. Richie isn't wearing the armor because he's basically become it, and that's the tragedy of him. He's not evil in the way Ralphie is evil, calculated and sadistic. He's not conflicted the way Tony is conflicted. He's just a man whose identity got locked in place at a specific moment in time and never got the chance to update. Everything since then has been damage control. Everything since then has been trying to hold together a version of himself that the world stopped confirming years ago. So Janice Soprano is the most dangerous person in Richie's life, and she never throws a punch. She finds him the second he gets out, and she does the one thing nobody else bothers to do. She tells him what he wants to hear, that he should be the boss, and that Tony doesn't deserve it. And Richie believes it, and of course he believes it. He's been waiting 10 years for someone to say it. But watch what's actually happening in those scenes. Richie isn't plotting, because he doesn't have a plan. He has resentment, and Janice has a direction for it. She's not his partner because she's pointing him like a weapon and waiting to see what he hits. The toughest guy in the room is being steered by the person who understands his ego better than he does, and he has absolutely no idea this is happening. Then there's David Scatino, the sporting goods store guy, the civilian who gets into a card game he can't afford and ends up completely destroyed by Richie. The easy read is that it's about the debt, but it isn't about the debt. Scatino gets to have a normal life, a store, a family, a place in the world that doesn't require any of what Richie went through. And Richie dismantles that, not because of business, but because that normalcy is an insult. It's proof that you could choose a different life, that the sacrifice Richie made wasn't necessary. So he punishes David for existing outside the logic that destroyed Richie's own life. And then there's Tony. Every single scene between Richie and Tony is the same scene. Richie probing, looking for the crack, waiting for Tony to blink or flinch or show him something he can use, some confirmation that Tony isn't actually what everyone thinks he is. And well, Tony never does. And Tony just looks back at him calmly. And that stillness, that refusal to be rattled, it drives Richie insane. Because if Tony is legitimately secure, then Richie's whole frame breaks. Then the version of the world where Richie got robbed of what he deserved basically stops making sense. So he keeps probing and Tony keeps not blinking. And the whole relationship is basically just that on repeat until it ends. So you spend a season waiting for the Richie situation to explode. The tension with Tony keeps climbing, Janice keeps pushing, and it feels like it's building to something big enough to watch how much space Richie takes up in every scene. And then Richie hits Janice, and Janice shoots him at the kitchen table, and well, that's it. No war, no dramatic standoff, and well, no final speech. Just a body that Tony has to dispose of before the episode ends. That's the most honest ending the show could have given him. All of that performance, and all of those years of making sure everyone in every room understood what he was capable of. Taken out not by a rival, but by the one person who got close enough to see past the act. The Sopranos is telling you something very specific with that ending. The most dangerous seeming man in the room is also the most fragile, and fragility left unchecked doesn't end in a blaze because it ends small at a kitchen table quietly, the way it was always going to.